Can I kiss you just once? The billionaire asked, never knowing that kiss would break his walls. If you believe love can bloom even in the most unexpected places, do not forget to subscribe and stay until the end, because one small act of courage might just change everything. The summer sun was fierce over the island of Santorini, pouring gold across the white rooftops and the endless blue sea. Tourists wandered through the narrow streets, cameras clicking, laughter echoing off the walls. But at the far end of the pier, Elena Tran stood still, her old film camera pressed to her eye. She waited for light, that one soft flicker that could turn an ordinary moment into something eternal. Her white cotton dress clung to her knees in the wind. She smelled faintly of sea salt and jasmine, the scent of long days and quiet dreams. For Elena, photography was not about money or fame. It was about proof. Proof that there was still beauty in people the world had forgotten. Behind her, a commotion broke out near the luxury yacht dock. Reporters shouted questions, microphones raised, flashes sparking like lightning. Elena lowered her camera. A man in a dark suit stepped out of the crowd, tall, broad-shouldered, with the calm arrogance of someone used to control. She recognized him immediately. Alexander Hale. The billionaire whose company, Hale Technologies, was on every newsfeed this week, not for his inventions, but for his broken engagement to a senator's daughter. He moved fast, his eyes searching for cover. And then, suddenly, they found hers. Elena, right? His voice was low, urgent, like gravel under rain. You are the photographer from the charity shoot? She hesitated, surprised he even knew her name. Yes, why? Cameras turned toward them. Paparazzi shouted. The air was electric. Alexander took one slow step closer, his jaw tight, his gaze steady. Can I kiss you? He said quietly, just once. Elena blinked. Excuse me? He leaned in, voice even lower. If I walk away alone, they will destroy my company by morning. But if they see me with you, it becomes a story about second chances. I am not asking for forever. Just one kiss. The wind whipped around them, carrying the smell of salt and heat. Her heart pounded in her ears. Somewhere inside her, a small voice whispered, if I do this, my life will never be the same. And still, she nodded. His hand brushed her cheek warm, deliberate. When his lips met hers, the world seemed to go silent. The crowd gasped, cameras flashed, but Elena heard none of it. For a second, time itself paused. It was supposed to be a lie, a distraction, a calculated move. But when he pulled away, something in his eyes had changed. A softness, a crack in the wall he had built around himself. She stepped back, breathless, her pulse racing. You got what you needed, she said quietly. Now, please let me get back to my light. Alexander watched her lift her camera again, her focus steady as if nothing had happened. He wanted to thank her, but the words stayed trapped behind the truth he could not yet admit, that kiss had felt far too real. That night, as the headlines spread across the world, Alexander Hale's new mystery woman, Elena sat on her small balcony overlooking the sea, her old camera beside her. She looked up at the stars and whispered to herself, one kiss, that is all. But deep down, she already knew summer had just begun, and nothing would ever be the same again. Now, let us return to our main character. The next morning, the sea shimmered like molten glass beneath the rising Sunday. The island woke slowly, fishermen calling from the docks, the scent of coffee drifting through open windows. Elena sat on her small balcony, her camera on the table beside her, flipping through the morning newspaper that someone had slid under her door. Her photograph was on the front page, her lips against Alexander Hale's, his hand on her face, the world frozen in a perfect scandal. The headline read, The Billionaire's Summer Kiss. She let out a long breath. Just one kiss, she murmured. And now the whole world thinks I am his lover. Her phone buzzed endlessly. Unknown numbers. Reporters. Offers from magazines. She ignored them all. She turned her face toward the sea, trying to remember the silence that had followed that kiss, the calm before the noise. A knock on the door. When she opened it, he was standing there. No bodyguards, no press. Just Alexander Hale in a simple linen shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, eyes tired but focused. I owe you an apology, he said softly. And an offer. She crossed her arms, wary. You already got what you needed, Mr. Hale. You can leave now. He glanced down, then met her gaze again. I cannot. Not yet. The board believes the story. They want me to stabilize the company's image. That means maintaining the illusion that you and I are together. Publicly. Elena blinked. You want me to keep pretending to be your girlfriend? Not just that, he said, choosing his words carefully. They expect us to formalize it, to make it look permanent. A temporary marriage arrangement. She laughed once, short and sharp. That is absurd. I will pay you, he said quickly. $300,000 for 3 months. Enough to fund whatever project you told the journalist about the community gallery, right? I read the article from last year. Her chest tightened. That dream again. The small gallery her mother had loved. The one that closed after her passing. He took a step closer. You said once that light belongs to everyone. Help me remind people of that, and I will help you reopen it. She looked at him for a long time. The sea wind tugged at her hair. For all his wealth, he looked strangely human, a man who was losing control of his own life and trying to buy it back with decency. Finally, she spoke. 3 months. That is all. He nodded. 3 months. I will have the paperwork sent this afternoon. Later that day, Elena found herself standing in front of the grand villa overlooking the water, white stone, blue shutters, and an infinity pool that blended with the horizon. The kind of place she would normally photograph from afar, never enter. Inside, lawyers arranged folders. Assistants whispered instructions, and Alexander stood waiting beside a polished oak table. He looked at her as she approached, his expression unreadable. You still have time to walk away, he said quietly. Elena took the pen from the folder, her hand steady. No, she said. I made a promise to my mother once, to never run from what scares me. She signed. He signed. The air between them shifted, formal, fragile, charged. As the lawyers left, silence filled the room. Outside, cicadas sang in the heat. Alexander poured 2 glasses of water, handed one to her, and said, almost to himself, It is strange, is it not? We make deals with strangers hoping they will make us whole. Elena raised her glass, eyes steady on his. Maybe that is because strangers see us the way we forgot to see ourselves. And for a brief moment, under the blazing summer light, they both smiled, 2 people caught in a lie that already felt dangerously close to something real. The first week in the villa felt like living inside a painting. The sea glittered beyond the terrace, and the air smelled of lemon and salt. From sunrise to dusk, the house glowed in golden light, every shadow moving like time itself. Elena tried to keep her distance. She spent her mornings photographing the coast, her afternoons in the small studio room she had claimed for herself. Alexander spent his days on video calls and meetings, his voice low, controlled, full of that sharp precision that came from years of building empires. They rarely spoke, yet silence in that house carried a strange kind of music. One evening, she was setting up her camera when she heard footsteps behind her. You really do not rest, do you? Alexander asked. She turned. He was standing in the doorway, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up. Light does not wait, she replied. If you want to capture something honest, you have to be there when it happens. He smiled faintly. That sounds like business, not art. No, she said, lowering her camera. Business is about control. Art is about surrender. For the first time, he did not have a response. A few days later, their public life began. They attended a charity dinner in Athens together, their hands brushing for the cameras. Elena wore a simple silver dress, elegant but understated. She hated the way reporters shouted questions, the way flashlights blurred the truth. Yet Alexander's hand at her back was steady, protective, almost gentle. Inside the ballroom, he leaned closer and whispered, You are doing great. Just keep breathing. She nodded. You do this all the time? Pretend? His lips curved slightly. Yes, more often than you would think. When the speeches began, Elena's eyes wandered to the artwork displayed on the walls. Photographs of landscapes, cities, people frozen in luxury. All beautiful, but empty. No dirt, no real faces. After the event, she told him quietly, You could use your money to show something real. Not just shine, but humanity. He looked at her, surprised. And what would you show? She met his gaze. The kind of people who cannot afford to be seen. The car ride back to the villa was quiet. Outside, the moon spread silver over the water. That night, Elena could not sleep. She walked to the terrace, barefoot, camera in hand. The air was warm, the waves whispering below. She looked through her lens and saw Alexander sitting by the pool, a glass of wine beside him, staring at nothing. He looked smaller without his armor of control. Can I take your picture? She asked. He turned. Why would you want to? Because right now, she said, you are real. He said nothing, but he did not move when the shutter clicked. The next morning, he found the photograph printed and left on his desk. In the image, he was sitting alone, half in shadow, half in light, a man caught between 2 worlds. He studied it for a long time, then walked out to the garden, where Elena was trimming the flowers that grew wild along the wall. "You saw something in me that I do not even see myself," he said quietly. She looked up, smiling faintly. "That is what artists do. We remind people of who they are before the world told them otherwise." He watched her for a moment, the sunlight glinting in her hair. "You make it sound easy." "It is not," she said, returning to her work. "But it is worth it." As she walked away, Alexander realized for the first time in years, someone had spoken to him not as a headline, not as a billionaire, but as a man. And that realization unsettled him more than any business deal ever could. Summer deepened across the Amalfi coast, and with it, the strange rhythm of their new life. Every morning, the sunlight spilled through the villa's tall windows, filling the rooms with warmth. The house staff came and went quietly, pretending not to notice that the two people they served were pretending to be married. Elena had started leaving her camera on the dining table. Each day, she took one photo of something that made her feel alive: a half-empty cup of coffee, a shadow on the wall, Alexander's jacket draped over a chair. She said it helped her remember that every story had small moments worth keeping. Alexander watched her more often than he intended. The woman who had once been a stranger now filled the quiet spaces of his life. She asked questions no one else dared to ask. She told him when he was wrong, and sometimes when he was right. The more time they spent together, the harder it became to keep his distance. One afternoon, while they were walking along the shore for a charity photo session, a sudden wave caught them both off guard. Elena laughed as the water soaked her dress, the sound bright and genuine. Alexander, still in his suit pants, looked down at himself, then at her, and for the first time in months, he laughed too. It was a full, unguarded laugh that startled them both. "See?" she said, brushing the salt from her hair. "You are capable of being human after all." He shook his head, still smiling. "Do not tell anyone. It might ruin my reputation." The photographers nearby captured the moment, thinking it was just part of the act. Neither of them corrected it. That evening, they shared dinner on the terrace. The sun was setting in streaks of orange and gold, and the air was soft with the smell of basil and grilled lemon. Elena poured wine and raised her glass. "To pretending," she said playfully. Alexander touched his glass to hers. "To the most convincing performance of my life." She looked at him, eyes steady. "Is that all it is?" He hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Ask me again in 3 months." For a while they ate in silence. Then he asked, "Why photography? You could have done anything else." She set her fork down and looked toward the sea. "When I was a child, my mother worked as a nurse. She said people always look their most honest when they think no one is watching. I guess I wanted to prove her right. And do you think you have?" "Sometimes. But it is harder now. Everyone performs even for themselves." Her words lingered. Later that night, he found her asleep on the sofa, her camera still in her hand. The photo on the screen was of him, laughing on the beach. He stood there for a long time, unsure whether to wake her or let her dream. The next morning brought new headlines. Their love story had become the season's favorite obsession. Magazines printed photos of their beach laughter, calling it the Hale summer romance. Alexander frowned at the articles, then turned to find Elena in the garden, feeding a stray cat that had begun visiting the villa. She crouched down, speaking softly to the animal as it nuzzled her hand. When she noticed him watching, she smiled. "Even cats know when someone is pretending." He crossed his arms. "And what do you think they see?" "That you are lonely," she said simply, "and that you are trying very hard not to be." The truth of it hit deeper than he expected. That night, Alexander walked alone along the beach, the waves glowing under the moonlight. He could still hear her laughter in the wind. For the first time in his life, he wondered if pretending could lead him somewhere real. In the distance, Elena stood at the balcony, her camera aimed toward the sea, capturing him in that quiet moment, a man finally learning how to breathe. By late July, their story had taken on a life of its own. Every magazine, every gossip channel, every online article called them the summer miracle. People loved the narrative of the cold billionaire and the humble artist who taught him how to feel again. What they did not know was how heavy it felt to live inside a lie that was starting to look like the truth. The villa had become both a refuge and a cage. Reporters camped outside the gate, drones hovered above the terrace, and the staff whispered about wedding rumors. To escape the noise, Elena began rising before dawn to walk the cliffs and photograph the first light. Alexander often found her there, standing barefoot on the rocks, her hair tangled by the wind, her camera steady in her hands. One morning, he joined her without a word. Together they watched the horizon turn from gray to gold. After a while, She lowered her camera and said quietly, "You should see how you look right now." He glanced at her, half smiling. "Tired?" "No," she said. "Human." Later that week, they attended the annual Gala of Hope, a charity event for children's hospitals. It was their biggest appearance yet. The ballroom sparkled with chandeliers, champagne flowed, and the cameras never stopped flashing. Elena felt the weight of the eyes on her, every step calculated, every smile measured. When the host called them to the stage, Alexander took her hand. His grip was firm, reassuring. She leaned close and whispered, "Do I look convincing enough?" He looked at her, the corners of his mouth softening. "You do not have to try so hard." In front of hundreds of guests, he spoke about innovation and kindness, about how success meant nothing if it did not serve others. It was the first time his voice sounded unguarded, almost tender. When the applause came, he turned to her and said for the microphone to catch, none of this would mean anything without her. The crowd cheered, cameras flashed. Elena's throat tightened. She smiled for the audience, but inside, something fragile began to shift. After the gala, they slipped out to the balcony overlooking the harbor. The night air was warm, filled with music and laughter from below. Elena leaned against the railing. "You should have been an actor," she said softly. Alexander turned to her. That was not acting. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, without thinking, he reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face. She did not move away. The city lights reflected in her eyes like stars on water. "It feels real sometimes," she whispered. He swallowed hard. "Maybe it is." The sound of laughter from inside pulled them apart. Reporters were looking for them again. The illusion had to continue. They walked back in, side by side, smiling for the cameras. That night, Elena lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She could still feel the warmth of his hand against her skin, the echo of his voice saying maybe it is. But she also remembered the contract on her dresser, the signature that bound them to a timeline. 3 months. No feelings. No promises. Down the hall, Alexander sat alone in his office, the printed photo of himself that she had taken weeks ago lying on his desk, half in light, half in shadow. He traced the edge of it with his finger and whispered to the empty room, "What if I want it to be real?" Outside, the summer wind carried the sound of the sea through the open windows, mingling their unspoken thoughts into the night. Neither of them knew it yet, but the line between their act and their hearts had already disappeared. The first week of August arrived with an uneasy calm. The air felt heavier, the days longer, as if time itself hesitated between what was real and what was still a performance. Elena could feel it too, the quiet tension that lingered after every shared glance, the weight of something unspoken waiting to surface. She tried to focus on her photography, filling rolls of film with sunsets and fishermen, and the faces of people who still smiled even when life gave them little reason to. Yet no matter where she pointed her lens, she saw his reflection in the glass, his voice carried by the sea wind, his shadow behind her as if he were stitched into every frame. Alexander had grown quieter. He spent less time on calls and more time watching her work. One afternoon she found him standing in the doorway of her studio, studying the photographs pinned to the wall. "They are not perfect," she said, wiping her hands on a cloth. "They do not need to be," he replied. "They are honest. That is rarer than perfection." He picked up one of the photographs, a child's hand holding an old woman's fingers. "You see things most people miss." "That is because I do not look for power," she said softly. "I look for connection." He met her gaze. "Maybe that is why you scare me." The words hung between them like a confession. Later that evening, she joined him on the terrace. The sky was burning orange over the water. He poured 2 glasses of wine and handed one to her. "You once asked me why I chose photography," she said. "Can I ask you something now? Anything. Why do you chase control so much? Money, power, reputation, none of it seems to make you happy." He looked down at the glass in his hand. "Because when you lose control once, you spend the rest of your life trying to get it back." "Who took it from you?" she asked. He hesitated. "My father. He built everything I inherited, then tore it apart before he died. I swore I would never let chaos win again." Elena listened quietly. Maybe control is just another kind of prison. He glanced at her, and for the first time his expression softened completely. "Then what sets people free?" "Truth," she said simply, "even when it hurts." The silence that followed was heavy, almost tender. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "What if the truth is that I am starting to care about you?" Elena's breath caught. "Then we are both breaking the rules." Before he could answer, the sound of a camera shutter broke the moment. Flashlights flared from the cliffs below. Paparazzi had found them again, capturing their closeness under the fading Sunday. By morning, the photographs were everywhere, the kiss that was never just an act. The world called it romance. For them, it was a storm. Alexander's assistant rushed into his office, pale and anxious. The board is furious. They think the relationship is real. Investors are threatening to pull out unless you clarify everything. He turned toward the window, where Elena stood outside, tending to her garden as if the world was not burning around them. He realized he could not protect her from what was coming. That evening, she walked into his study, holding the newspaper. "So this is how the truth finally finds us," she said quietly. He looked at her, his face drawn. "I can fix this. I will make a statement, say it was all a misunderstanding." Her eyes shimmered, hurt but calm. "You mean say that I never mattered?" "Elena," she shook her head. "You do not need to protect me. You just need to be honest." And with that, she placed her camera on his desk, the same one that had captured every hidden truth between them, and walked out into the night. Outside, the waves crashed against the rocks, erasing their footprints in the sand, as if the sea itself refused to take sides. The following days passed like a storm that refused to end. News outlets replayed the same photographs again and again: the sunset, their closeness, the kiss that seemed too real to be staged. Talk shows debated whether their love story was genuine or another public performance. Investors demanded explanations, and every headline used her name as bait for outrage. Elena had disappeared from the villa the night she left her camera on his desk. No note, no forwarding address, just silence. Alexander sent people to look for her, but the island gave up no answers. She was gone, and the house felt hollow without her. He spent his mornings pacing the terrace, staring at the empty chair where she used to sit, and his nights reading the contract they had both signed, its clean lines mocking the mess their hearts had made. He realized that he had built his life on control, only to lose the one thing that made him feel free. On the third day, a letter arrived. It was short, handwritten, and smelled faintly of salt. "Alexander, do not look for me. You said truth sets people free. I need to find mine before I become just another version of your lie. Ye." He folded the letter slowly, pressing it against his chest as if it could stop the ache there. By the end of the week, his company was in chaos. Board members demanded that he issue a formal denial of any real relationship. The public scandal was driving the stock value down. During the meeting, voices rose and accusations flew. One of the executives said sharply, "You have 48 hours to clear your name, or we will remove you as chief executive officer." Alexander looked at them, his face calm but his eyes distant. "If protecting my name means denying something real, then maybe it is time someone else ran this company." He stood up and walked out before anyone could answer. Outside, the afternoon sun burned hot against the marble steps. He felt lighter and lonelier than he had in years. For the first time, he did not have a plan. That evening, he drove along the coastal road until the villas gave way to small fishing towns. At a quiet dock, he saw a group of children chasing gulls near a faded art studio. Inside, a familiar voice was giving instructions about light and shadows. Elena stood at the center of the room, surrounded by old cameras and curious faces. Her hair was tied back, her clothes simple, her eyes alive again. She was teaching photography to children, the kind of workshop she once dreamed about. When she saw him through the open door, her breath caught, but she did not stop speaking. He waited until the class ended, then stepped forward. "I read your letter," he said softly. "You said you needed to find your truth. Did you?" She wiped her hands on a cloth, steady but guarded. "Yes, it is here, in the faces of people who have nothing to hide." He nodded, taking in the walls covered with photographs, images of joy, grief, resilience. "You always saw the world better than I did." Her voice softened. "Then why are you here, Alexander?" He took a deep breath. "Because I cannot fix what happened, but I can choose to stop pretending. I resigned today." Elena blinked, surprise flickering across her face. "You walked away from everything?" "Not everything," he said. "Just the parts that were never real." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The sound of waves outside filled the space between them. Finally, she said quietly, "What are you looking for now?" He smiled, a little broken, a little hopeful. "Maybe the same thing you are. A second chance at something honest." The light through the window fell over both of them, warm and forgiving, as if the world itself had paused to listen. Outside, the summer wind carried the scent of salt and new beginnings. 2 weeks later, the island prepared for the annual arts festival, a celebration of local painters, sculptors, and photographers. Elena had been asked to display her students' work at the community gallery she helped reopen. The walls, once cracked and empty, now glowed with photographs that told quiet stories, calloused hands, sunlit faces, fishermen repairing nets, children laughing in the streets. When the festival began, the air buzzed with music and the scent of roasted almonds. Tourists drifted through the narrow alleys, stopping to admire the art that had grown from the island's silence. Elena stood near the entrance of the gallery, greeting guests, her smile calm but guarded. She had built something honest, something that did not depend on anyone else's power. Yet a part of her still carried the echo of the life she had left behind. Outside, the crowd shifted, whispers spreading like a ripple through the air. A tall man in a white shirt stepped out of a black car. He moved slowly, unannounced, his eyes scanning the rows of artwork until they found her, Alexander. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. He looked around the room, taking in the photographs, the handmade frames, the community that had gathered around her. Then he said quietly, "You did it. You brought the light back." She nodded, her voice steady. "Not just me, them. They believed beauty still matters." He smiled faintly. "That was always your gift. You make people believe again." The crowd gave way as they walked through the gallery together. On one wall hung a single photograph apart from the rest, a black and white portrait of Alexander sitting by the pool, half in sunlight, half in shadow. Beneath it, a small plaque read, "The Man Who Learned to See." He stopped in front of it, his breath catching. "You kept it." "I did," she said, "because it was the moment you stopped pretending." He turned to her. "I came to ask for another chance. Not to fix what was broken, but to build something new. I have started a foundation, the Hale Fund for Creative Voices. It supports artists who use their work to heal communities. It should be yours to lead." She looked at him, astonished. "You are serious?" He nodded. "It is already registered. I named it after your first exhibit, The Invisible Light." Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. "Alexander, you do not owe me anything." He stepped closer, his voice low. "It is not a debt, it is gratitude. You taught me that love is not about ownership, it is about contribution." The music outside softened. The sun poured through the open windows, turning the dust in the air into gold. She whispered, "And what if I say yes?" "Then," he said, taking her hand gently, "we stop hiding behind what was fake and start living what is real." For a heartbeat, everything stilled. The world around them, the music, the laughter, the light seemed to fade until there was only the sound of their breathing and the warmth of their joined hands. He leaned closer, his voice barely a breath. "Can I kiss you just once?" Elena smiled through her tears. "You already know the answer." This time there were no cameras, no contracts, no lies, just sunlight, honesty, and the quiet miracle of two people finding their way back to the truth. When their lips met, the crowd outside cheered as fireworks bloomed above the harbor. It was not for them, but somehow it felt like it was. And for the first time, their story did not feel borrowed or staged. It was theirs, real, imperfect, and finally free. The summer faded slowly into September, soft and golden, like the last pages of a story that did not want to end. The crowds had left the island, and the harbor was quiet again. The gallery remained open, its windows glowing each evening with the warmth of its lamps. Inside, photographs from the festival still hung on the walls, faces, hands, light, each one a small testimony to hope. Elena sat at her work table, sorting through film negatives. The sound of the sea drifted through the open door, calm and steady. Behind her, she heard footsteps she already knew by heart. Alexander entered quietly, his white shirt sleeves rolled up, a bouquet of wild daisies in his hand. "I brought these from the hill," he said. "They reminded me of you." She looked up and smiled. "You are learning to notice small things." He placed the flowers in an old glass bottle and sat across from her. "It is strange," he said. "For the first time I wake up without a schedule, without an agenda, just the sound of waves and the smell of coffee." "That means you are finally living," she said softly. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a photograph, one she had not taken. It showed her standing by the shore at sunrise, hair tangled, camera in hand, looking into the distance. "I took this the morning after the festival," he said. "I wanted to remember how it felt to see you without walls between us." Elena traced the edge of the photo, her throat tight. "It is beautiful," she whispered. He smiled gently. "It is honest." They sat in silence for a while, the rhythm of the waves filling the space between words. Outside, the light shifted, warm and soft, wrapping the room in gold. After a moment, Alexander spoke again. The foundation launches next month in New York. I want you to come with me, to lead it, to choose the projects, to decide what stories deserve to be told. She hesitated. And what about the gallery? The students? They will still be here, he said. We can build something that connects both worlds. Light travels farther when it has more than one source. Her eyes glistened. You always speak like you are writing a promise. He reached across the table, his hand covering hers. Maybe I am. That night, the two of them walked down to the beach. The sand was cool under their feet, and the stars shimmered like scattered silver. Do you remember our first kiss? He asked quietly. Elena laughed. How could I forget? You were terrified. I still am, he admitted, but not of you, of losing what we found. She looked up at him, her voice steady. Then do not lose it. Protect it. Nurture it. Live it. He nodded, his eyes soft in the moonlight. For the rest of my life. They stood there, hand in hand, as the tide rolled in and the world turned quietly around them. In the distance, the villa lights flickered, reflecting across the sea the same place where everything had begun. Elena lifted her camera and snapped one final photo. The frame caught only two silhouettes against the horizon, standing close, heads bowed together as if whispering a secret to the ocean. And in that image there was no contract, no scandal, no performance, only two people, finally unmasked, living proof that sometimes what begins as a lie can end as the most honest thing in the world.